The notification sound from my phone cut through the silence. Julia's car hadn't moved from Greg Stanton's driveway in 27 minutes, and according to her last text, she was stuck in traffic on I-5. Either Seattle had discovered the world's longest red light, or my wife was discovering new yoga positions with her boss. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Nathan Cole, 38 years old, and apparently the last person in Seattle to realize his marriage had become a participation trophy. While other husbands might punch walls or drink themselves into oblivion, I did what any self-respecting IT systems manager would do. I gathered data. The GPS tracker I'd installed in Julia's Honda Civic 3 weeks ago wasn't exactly NSA-level surveillance, just a simple device tucked behind her registration papers, the kind anxious parents used to monitor teenage drivers. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now tracking my 35-year-old wife like she was a rebellious 16-year-old sneaking out to meet boys. "Nathan, you're being paranoid," Julia had said last month when I mentioned her late nights at the office. "Greg's just demanding. You know how executives are." I knew exactly how Greg Stanton was. 44 years old, silver-haired, drove a Tesla Model S, and had the kind of confident smirk that suggested he'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. He was also married to Laura Stanton, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could disembowel someone with a salad fork and still make it to her book club on time. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Julia. "Sorry, honey, this traffic is insane. Don't wait up. Love you." I screenshot the message, then switched to the GPS app. Her car was still parked at 1247 Bellevue Avenue, Greg's address, which I'd memorized along with his license plate number, his wife's yoga schedule, and the fact that their garbage pickup was on Tuesdays. The smart home system I'd installed last year suddenly felt like overkill. Alexa couldn't help me now, and the automated lights seemed to mock me as they dimmed on schedule. Even my own technology was more reliable than my wife. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and settled into my leather chair. The one Julia always complained made our living room look like a sad man cave. She wasn't wrong. It was definitely sad now. My best friend Owen Lee had been warning me for months. "Dude, she's showing all the classic signs," he'd said during our last poker night. New perfume, phone face down during dinner, sudden interest in working late. "I've seen this movie before." Owen would know. He'd transitioned from hacker to private investigator after a brief stint with the FBI, decided that particular career path wasn't for him. His divorce, 3 years ago, had turned him into a cynical expert on marital deception. "You need to confront her," he'd insisted, "or at least get some proof." Well, Owen, I thought, raising my glass to the empty room. Proof acquired. The question now was what to do with it. I could confront Julia directly, but that would just lead to tears, denials, and promises to work on our marriage. I could hire a lawyer, but that seemed premature. Or I could do something that would make this whole situation infinitely more interesting. I opened my contacts and found Laura Stanton's number. Julia had insisted we exchange information with the Stantons after a company barbecue last summer, just in case of emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. I attached the screenshot of Julia's current location to a text message. No words, no explanation, just the cold, digital truth. Your husband and my wife are currently occupying the same coordinates, and it's not a business meeting. My finger hovered over the send button for exactly 3 seconds. Then I pressed it. The message showed as delivered immediately. I imagined Laura Stanton, probably reading in bed or watching Netflix, suddenly staring at her phone with the dawning realization that her perfect executive husband was entertaining guests. I didn't have to wait long for results. 15 minutes later, the GPS showed Julia's car moving fast, probably breaking several traffic laws as she raced home to beat whatever explosion was about to occur at the Stanton household. My phone rang. Julia's ringtone, the one I'd customized to play Somebody That I Used to Know by It, had been a joke when I set it up. Now it felt prophetic. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. The fourth time I answered, "Nathan." Julia's voice was breathless, panicked. "Nathan, something terrible happened. Laura Stanton showed up at Greg's house and started screaming. She thinks something's going on between us." "Is there?" I asked calmly, taking another sip of bourbon. "What? No, of course not. We were just working on the Henderson presentation. You know how important this account is." At 9:30 on a Thursday night in his living room. Silence then. "How did you lucky guess?" I said, "Traffic's cleared up." "I see, you're making good time." More silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew. "Nathan, I can explain everything when I get home. This is all just a misunderstanding." "I'm sure it is," I said. "Drive safe, Julia. Wouldn't want you to get in an accident rushing home from your very important business meeting." I hung up and immediately called Owen. "Please tell me you've got good news," he answered on the first ring. "Define good," I said. "Julia's been having an affair with her boss. I just blew up his marriage. She's currently racing home to explain why GPS technology is apparently lying about her whereabouts." "Holy Nathan, you actually did it. How do you feel?" I considered the question while watching the GPS dot that represented my wife's car navigate the familiar streets toward our house. How did I feel? Angry, certainly. Betrayed, obviously. But underneath those expected emotions was something else. A cold, calculating satisfaction. "I feel like I'm just getting started," I said. Owen laughed, the sound sharp and approving. "Now you're talking. What's the next move?" "Information gathering," I said. "I need to know how long this has been going on, who else knows about it, and exactly how deep this goes. Think you can help with that?" "Brother, I've been waiting for you to ask that question for 3 months. I've already got preliminary files on both of them. Greg Stanton's not as clean as he pretends to be, and your wife's been sloppy about covering her digital tracks." The garage door rumbled open. Julia was home. "I've got to go," I said. "Send me whatever you've got. And Owen, start documenting everything. I have a feeling this is going to get very interesting very quickly." "You got it. And Nathan, welcome to the war." I hung up just as Julia's key turned in the front door. She walked in looking like she'd been through a tornado, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, her usually perfect professional appearance completely destroyed. "Nathan," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "We need to talk." I looked at her over the rim of my bourbon glass. This woman I'd been married to for 8 years, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my Netflix password. She looked like a stranger. "No," I said calmly. "We really don't." Her face crumpled. "Please, I know how this looks, but Julia," I interrupted, setting down my glass. "The only thing we need to discuss is whether you want your things packed by tomorrow or if you need until the weekend." The color drained from her face. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then something shifted in her expression. The vulnerability disappeared, replaced by something harder. "You don't understand," she said. "Greg and I, it's not what you think. It's complicated." "I'm sure it is," I said. "Adultery often is." "Don't you dare judge me," she snapped, her true colors finally showing. "You have no idea what it's like being married to someone who's more interested in his computers than his wife. When's the last time you took me somewhere nice? When's the last time you made me feel special? I stood up slowly, setting my glass on the coffee table with deliberate care. "When's the last time you came home when you said you would?" I asked quietly. "When's the last time you looked me in the eye during dinner instead of staring at your phone? When's the last time you acted like you wanted to be in the same room as me?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. That's what I thought. I said, "Pack your things, Julia. We're done." I walked past her toward the stairs, but her voice stopped me. "You'll regret this, Nathan. Greg's not going to let you destroy his life over some misunderstanding. He's got connections, resources. You're just an IT guy." I turned back to look at her, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I smiled. "You're right," I said. "I am just an IT guy. But do you know what IT guys are really good at?" She shook her head. "We're good at systems. We understand how things connect, how information flows, how to find the weak points in any network." I paused, letting that sink in. "And Julia, your boyfriend's system is about to crash." I went upstairs, leaving her standing in our living room, probably trying to figure out if that was a threat or a promise. It was both. The next morning brought chaos in digital form. My phone was buzzing with notifications from the neighborhood app next door, where apparently the Stanton domestic dispute had provided entertainment for half of Bellevue. "Did anyone else hear all that shouting from the Stanton house last night?" posted Jennifer Martinez from 3 houses down. "I saw police cars," replied Tom Wilson. "Hope everything's okay." Police cars? That was new information. Laura Stanton had apparently escalated beyond a simple confrontation. Julia had left some time before dawn, taking 2 suitcases and her dignity, what little remained of it. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "This isn't over. We need to talk about the house, the finances, everything. Don't do anything stupid." Too late for that advice. Owen arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and a thick manila folder. "Please tell me that's not just Greg's credit report," I said, letting him in. "Oh, it's so much better than that." Owen grinned, settling onto the couch like he was about to reveal state secrets. "Your wife and her boyfriend have been incredibly careless. Text messages, emails, hotel receipts charged to company credit cards. This affair has been going on for 6 months minimum." He opened the folder and spread out printed pages like he was dealing cards. "Here's where it gets interesting," he continued. "Greg's been using company funds for their little rendezvous, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, even a weekend trip to Portland that was supposedly a business conference. Except the conference was fictional, and the hotel room was registered under both their names. I studied the documents, credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, a paper trail of infidelity funded by corporate accounts." "This is embezzlement," I said. "Technically, yes, but here's the beautiful part. Julia's been helping him cover it up. She's the one processing his expense reports, approving the charges, creating fake invoices for services that were never rendered." I felt that cold satisfaction spreading through my chest again. They're both implicated completely. And there's more. Owen pulled out his phone and showed me a series of screenshots. Julia's been texting her friend Amanda about the affair. Amanda works in HR at their company. She's been giving Julia inside information about any potential investigations, helping her stay ahead of any suspicions. The scope of the conspiracy was impressive. Julia hadn't just betrayed our marriage. She'd orchestrated a complex scheme involving fraud, conspiracy, and corruption. "How did you get all this?" I asked. Owen's grin turned predatory. "Julia never changed the password on your shared cloud account. Every photo she takes, every document she saves, every backup of her text messages gets automatically synced. She's been documenting her own crimes." I stared at the evidence spread across my coffee table. Months of deception carefully cataloged and preserved by the very technology Julia barely understood. "What's our next move?" I asked. "That depends," Owen said. How far are you willing to take this? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. Nathan Cole. The voice was crisp. Professional female. Yes, this is Laura Stanton. I believe we need to talk. I looked at Owen, who was practically vibrating with excitement. I think you're right, I said. When and where? There's a coffee shop called Grind on Pine Street. 1 hour. Come alone and bring whatever evidence you have. The line went silent. Laura Stanton wants to meet. I told Owen the Wronged Wife Summit. Owen said this is perfect. She's probably got information we don't have, and she's definitely motivated for revenge. You think I should trust her? I think you should verify everything she tells you. But yeah, use her. She's got access to Greg's personal information, his schedule, his weaknesses. Plus, she's probably angrier than you are. Doubtful, I said, but I was already reaching for my jacket. Grind on Pine Street was the kind of aggressively hip coffee shop that charged $8 for drinks with names like The Existential Crisis and Capitalism's Last Stand. Laura Stanton was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a plain black coffee and an expression that could have frozen the Puget Sound. She was prettier than I remembered from company functions, but there was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Betrayal had sharpened her features into something dangerous. Mr. Cole, she said as I approached, thank you for coming. Call me Nathan, and thank you for that text last night. It was illuminating. She gestured for me to sit. I assume you have more evidence than just GPS coordinates. I pulled out my phone and showed her some of Owen's discoveries. Her expression didn't change as she scrolled through the hotel receipts and text message screenshots, but I could see her jaw tightening. 6 months, she said finally. I suspected for 3, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. What gave it away? The usual things. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, sudden interest in working out. She looked up from the phone and the credit card bills. Greg's always been careless with money, but he was spending more than usual. When I asked about it, he said it was all business expenses. Technically, he wasn't lying. I said his business was sleeping with my wife. Laura's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. How long have you known? Suspected for weeks. Confirmed last night when I tracked Julia's car to your house. You tracked her car? I explained about the GPS device, and this time Laura did smile. It wasn't a pleasant expression. That's brilliant, she said. Greg thinks he's so smart, so careful. He has no idea how much evidence he's left behind. What kind of evidence? Laura reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. Greg talks in his sleep, she said. For the past month, I've been recording everything. Names, dates, places. He's been having very detailed dreams about your wife. I stared at the recorder. That's thorough. I'm a thorough person, Nathan. When I discovered my husband was cheating, I decided to document everything. Phone records, credit card statements, emails I recovered from his laptop. I've been building a case for divorce, for complete destruction. Her voice was calm, matter of fact. Greg destroyed my marriage, my trust, my life. I intend to return the favor. I was beginning to understand why Greg had looked elsewhere for companionship. Laura Stanton was terrifying. What did you have in mind? I asked. Greg's company is publicly traded. They have strict policies about executive conduct, especially regarding the use of company funds for personal expenses. If the board discovered that one of their VPs was embezzling money to fund an extramarital affair, he'd be fired. He'd be fired, investigated, and probably prosecuted. The scandal would make him unemployable in his industry. Greg Toole and Julia conspiracy to commit fraud. She'd be fired too. And with her reputation destroyed, she'd never work in corporate administration again. It was elegant, thorough, and completely ruthless. I was impressed. There's just one problem, I said. If we expose them through official channels, it becomes a legal matter. Lawyers, investigations, plea bargains. They might get reduced sentences or find ways to shift blame. Laura nodded. I've considered that, which is why I think we need to handle this ourselves first. Destroy them socially and professionally before involving law enforcement. What did you have in mind? Laura's smile turned predatory. Greg's company is having their annual investor meeting next week. 500 people, including clients, board members, and media. Greg's scheduled to give a presentation on ethical business practices. The irony was beautiful. You want to expose him publicly? I want to destroy him publicly. Complete humiliation, broadcast to everyone who matters in his professional world. I paused, considering the implications. That's perfect. We spent the next hour planning. Laura had access to Greg's laptop, his calendar, his presentation files. I had technical expertise and Owen's investigative skills. Together, we could orchestrate a public destruction that would leave both Greg and Julia professionally and socially ruined. By the time I left the coffee shop, I felt like I was part of a military operation. Laura Stanton wasn't just seeking revenge, she was planning a coordinated assault. I called Owen from my car. How did it go? He asked. Laura Stanton makes you look like an amateur, I said. We're going to war. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and intelligence gathering. Owen had expanded his surveillance to include Amanda from HR and Vince Morrison, Greg's assistant, who apparently knew about the affair and had been helping to cover it up. It's like a conspiracy, Owen reported during one of our evening briefings in my kitchen. Half the office knows what's going on, and they're all protecting each other. What about Julia? I asked. Where's she staying? Cheap motel on Aurora Avenue, the Sunset Inn, room 237. She's been there 3 nights paying cash. Probably doesn't want a paper trail leading back to Greg. That was interesting. If Julia was hiding her location, it meant she was worried about something. Maybe Laura's confrontation had been more threatening than I'd realized. Any contact between them since the blow-up? Oh yeah, they've been texting constantly, but they're using a messaging app that encrypts everything. However, Owen grinned. Julia's been backing up her photos to your shared cloud account, and some of those photos include screenshots of their conversations. He showed me his laptop screen. Screenshots of text conversations between Julia and Greg, discussing damage control, coordinating their stories, and planning their next moves. Greg's convinced you're going to try to blackmail him, Owen said. He's been researching private investigators, trying to find dirt on you. Good luck with that, I said. The most scandalous thing in my history is a speeding ticket from 2019. Julia's more worried about Laura. Apparently, Greg's wife made some threats about destroying everyone involved. She wasn't exaggerating, I said, thinking about our coffee shop meeting. What else? This is the interesting part. Amanda from HR has been feeding information to Julia about the company's investigation policies. If someone were to report Greg's expense account irregularities, there's a specific process they'd follow, including a preliminary audit that takes about 2 weeks. 2 weeks until the investor meeting. Exactly. If we time this right, the investigation will be in full swing, just as Greg's supposed to give his presentation on business ethics. The timing was perfect. Too perfect to be coincidental. Owen, I said slowly. Did you hack into the company's systems to find out about their investigation timeline? I prefer the term unauthorized information access, he said. And hypothetically, if someone had done that, they might have also discovered that the company's IT security is embarrassingly weak, meaning that if someone wanted to, say, access Greg's company email account or modify his presentation files, it would be surprisingly easy to do. I stared at him. You're talking about sabotage. I'm talking about justice. These people destroyed your marriage, committed fraud, and corrupted an entire network of employees. They deserve whatever happens to them. He was right. but the scope of what we were planning was starting to feel overwhelming. We weren't just seeking revenge. We were orchestrating a complete, systematic destruction of multiple people's lives. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the safe house tonight at 11 p.m. Come alone, Jay." "Julia?" Owen asked, reading over my shoulder. "Has to be. But what's the safe house?" Owen was already typing on his laptop. Safe house, safe house. Here it is. It's an abandoned tech startup campus in South Seattle. The company went bankrupt 2 years ago, but the building's still there. Perfect place for a clandestine meeting or an ambush. I said, "You think Julia is setting you up?" "I think Julia's desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things." Owen closed his laptop. "Then we'd better be prepared for anything." The safe house turned out to be a glass and steel monument to failed ambition, sitting empty in an industrial district that had seen better days. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, and several windows on the upper floors were broken. Julia's Honda was parked near the main entrance, along with a black BMW I didn't recognize. "She brought backup," I said into my phone. Owen was monitoring from his car a block away, connected to me via Bluetooth earpiece. "I can see the BMW," Owen's voice crackled in my ear. "License plate registered to Vincent Morrison. That's Greg's assistant." "So much for coming alone," I said. "Want me to call this off?" I considered it. Walking into a dark building to confront my cheating wife and her boyfriend's henchmen wasn't exactly a smart move. But I was tired of being reactive, tired of letting other people control the situation. "No," I said, "but stay close. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call the police." The main door was propped open with a brick. I walked through a lobby that still had motivational posters on the walls. "Innovation never sleeps," and "Disrupt or be disrupted." The irony wasn't lost on me. I found them on the second floor in what had probably been a conference room. Julia was sitting at a dusty table, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Vince Morrison was standing by the windows, trying to look intimidating in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my car. "Hello, Nathan," Julia said. Her voice was tired, defeated. "Thank you for coming, Julia." "Vince?" I nodded to each of them. "Interesting choice of venue. Very dramatic." "We needed somewhere private," Julia said. "Somewhere we could talk without being overheard." "Talk about what?" Vince stepped forward. He was a big guy, probably former college football, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never being challenged. "Talk about how you're going to stop this harassment campaign against Mr. Stanton and Ms. Cole," he said. I almost laughed. Harassment campaign? The GPS tracking? The messages to Mrs. Stanton? The investigation into company finances? "We know it's you." "You're giving me too much credit," I said. "I'm just an IT guy, remember?" Julia leaned forward. "Nathan, please. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but this has gone too far. Greg's marriage is destroyed. We're both under investigation at work, and now you're involving other people." "Other people like Amanda? Or other people like the hotel chains where you've been conducting your business meetings?" Vince's face darkened. "You need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove." "Oh, I can prove them," I said calmly. "Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages, photos. I've got a very comprehensive file." "You're bluffing," Vince said. I pulled out my phone and showed them one of Owen's screenshots, a text conversation between Julia and Amanda discussing the best times to book hotel rooms without raising suspicion. Julia's face went white. "How did you get that?" "You've been backing up your messages to our shared cloud account for months," I said. "Every screenshot, every photo, every conversation. You documented your own affair." Vince grabbed for my phone, but I was expecting it. I stepped back and triggered the panic alarm Owen had installed on my keychain. The sound was ear-splitting in the empty building. "That was stupid," Vince said, advancing toward me. "Was it?" I asked. Because my friend Owen is monitoring this building, and that alarm just told him to call the police. Vince stopped. Julia stood up, panic in her eyes. "Nathan, please," she said. "We can work this out. We can make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Greg's willing to compensate you for the inconvenience. We can make this worth your while." "You want to pay me off?" "We want to find a solution that works for everyone." Julia said, "You get a financial settlement, we get our lives back, and nobody has to go through a messy legal battle." I looked at my wife, this woman who had shared my bed for 8 years, who had promised to love and honor me, who was now trying to bribe me to ignore her adultery and fraud. "How much?" I asked. Julia looked relieved. Greg was thinking $50,000 cash, no questions asked. $50,000 to pretend I never discovered that you've been stealing from your company to fund hotel rooms with your boss. "It's not stealing," Vince said. "Those were legitimate business expenses for a business that involved my wife taking off her clothes." "Watch your mouth." Vince stepped forward again. "Or what?" I asked. "You'll assault me in an abandoned building while my friend records everything from the parking lot?" That stopped him. Julia grabbed his arm. "Vince, don't. This isn't helping." "Your boyfriend's not here to protect you," I said to Julia. "Where's Greg tonight? Letting his assistant handle the dirty work?" "Greg's handling the situation at his level," Vince said. "This is my level." "Your level is threatening people in empty buildings. That's impressive. Really moving up in the world." Vince's face was getting red. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think you've got everything figured out." "I think I've got enough evidence to destroy all of you," I said. "The question is whether I use it." "What do you want?" Julia asked. I pretended to consider the question. In reality, Owen and I had planned this conversation in detail. The goal was to get them to incriminate themselves further while we recorded everything. "I want the truth," I said. "How long has this been going on? Who else knows about it? And what exactly have you been doing with company money?" Julia looked at Vince, who shook his head slightly. "We're not admitting to anything," he said. "Then we don't have anything to discuss," I said, turning toward the door. "Wait," Julia called. "Nathan, wait." I stopped. 6 months, she said quietly. "It started 6 months ago at the Henderson account celebration. Greg and I had too much to drink, and you decided to celebrate in his hotel room. It wasn't supposed to happen again, but Greg was going through problems with Laura, and I was feeling neglected at home, and you thought adultery was the solution." "I thought I deserved to be happy," Julia snapped, her composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who cares more about his computers than his wife? When's the last time you surprised me with anything? When's the last time you made me feel special? When's the last time you came home when you said you would?" I shot back. "When's the last time you acted like you wanted to be married to me?" "That's not the point." "That's exactly the point, Julia. You were unhappy, so instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair. And instead of paying for your affair with your own money, you decided to commit fraud." "It's not fraud," Vince said. "Greg's expense account covers client entertainment." "Was Julia a client when you booked that hotel room in Portland?" Silence. "What about the restaurant bills, the spa treatments, the weekend getaway that was supposedly a business conference?" More silence. "Here's what I think happened," I continued. "Greg wanted to impress my wife, but he didn't want to spend his own money. So he started charging everything to the company, and Julia helped him create fake invoices and expense reports to cover it up." "You can't prove any of that," Vince said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. Julia's been photographing receipts and invoices for months, probably to keep track of where they went together. Every photo gets backed up to our shared account." Julia's face went completely white. "The Portland trip, the fake conference, The hotel room registered under both your names. The spa treatments charged to Greg's corporate card. I've got photos of all of it. Vince looked at Julia. You said you were being careful about documentation. I was. I never thought Nathan would. She trailed off, realizing what she just admitted. Never thought I'd what? Never thought I'd discover that my wife was helping her boyfriend embezzle money. It's not embezzlement, Julia shouted. Greg was going to pay it all back. When? After he got promoted? After he divorced his wife? After you divorced me? We hadn't decided anything about divorce, Julia said weakly. But you discussed it. Another silence that confirmed everything I needed to know. My earpiece crackled. Owen's voice. Nathan, you need to wrap this up. I see headlights coming toward the building. Who else is coming? I asked Julia and Vince. They looked confused, which meant the headlights weren't part of their plan. We need to go, I said. All of us. Now. Why? Vince asked. Because someone else knows we're here, and I don't think they're coming to join the conversation. The headlights Owen had spotted belonged to Laura Stanton's Mercedes. She parked next to Julia's Honda and walked into the building like she owned it. Well, she said, appearing in the doorway of our conference room. Isn't this cozy? Julia shrank back in her chair. Vince tried to look intimidating, but Laura's presence seemed to deflate him. Mrs. Stanton, I said. I wasn't expecting you. I'm sure you weren't. But when my private investigator told me that my husband's mistress and his assistant were meeting with the wronged husband in an abandoned building, I decided to see for myself. Your private investigator? Laura smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Did you think you were the only one gathering intelligence, Nathan? I've been documenting Greg's activities for months. She walked to the table and set down a thick folder. Credit card statements, hotel records, restaurant receipts, photographs, and audio recordings. Everything needed to prove that my husband and your wife have been conducting an affair using company funds. Vince stepped forward. You can't use any of that in court. It was obtained illegally. Was it? Laura asked. Greg and I have joint credit cards. I have every right to access those statements. The hotel records are public information if you know how to ask, and the audio recordings were made in my own home. She opened the folder and spread out documents like she was dealing cards. Here's my favorite, she said, pulling out a photograph. Greg and Julia at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel coming out of the elevator together. The room was registered under Greg's name and paid for with company funds. Julia looked at the photo and started crying. And this one? Laura continued, pulling out another photo. The two of them at Daniel's Broiler having what appears to be a very intimate dinner, also paid for with Greg's corporate credit card. How did you get these photos? I asked. I hired professionals, real private investigators, not just tech-savvy friends. She glanced at me. No offense, none taken. This is impressive work. Thank you, but I'm not done. Laura pulled out a small digital recorder. This is my personal favorite. Greg talking in his sleep about Julia's attributes. Very detailed descriptions. Very incriminating. Vince looked like he was going to be sick. Julia had stopped crying and was staring at Laura with something approaching terror. What do you want? Julia whispered. I want my husband destroyed, Laura said simply. I want his career ruined, his reputation demolished, and his bank account emptied. I want him to understand what it feels like to lose everything that matters. And Julia, I asked, your wife is collateral damage. She chose to involve herself in my marriage, so she gets to experience the consequences. This is insane, Vince said. You people are talking about destroying lives over a simple affair. Simple. Laura turned to him with ice in her eyes. There's nothing simple about fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. Your boss didn't just cheat on his wife. He committed multiple felonies and involved my husband's company in his crimes. Greg's not my husband, I said. Sorry, Julia's husband. You know what I meant. The correction was awkward, but it highlighted something important. Laura and I were allies of convenience, not friends. We both wanted revenge, but for different reasons and possibly to different degrees. So, what's the plan? I asked. The plan is complete destruction, Laura said. Greg's company is having their investor meeting next week. He's supposed to give a presentation on ethical business practices to 500 people, including clients, board members, and financial media. You want to expose him publicly? I want to humiliate him publicly. I want his professional reputation destroyed in front of everyone who matters in his industry. Julia stood up suddenly. I won't let you do this. You won't let us? Laura laughed. Julia, you're a secretary who's been helping her boss commit fraud. You have no power in this situation. I'm an executive assistant, Julia said weakly. You're unemployed, Laura corrected. As of tomorrow morning, both you and Greg will be suspended pending investigation. You can't know that. I can, and I do. I've already submitted evidence to your company's board of directors. The investigation starts Monday morning. The room went silent. Julia sat back down heavily, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. You're destroying innocent people, Vince said. Innocent? I asked. Vince, you've been helping them cover up fraud for months. You're as guilty as they are. I was following orders. You were facilitating crimes. Prove it. Owen's voice crackled in my earpiece. Nathan, we need to leave now. I see more cars coming. Who else is coming to this party? I asked. Before anyone could answer, we heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets moving quickly. Greg Stanton appeared in the doorway, flanked by two men in expensive suits who looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate security manual. Well, Greg said, surveying the room. Isn't this interesting? He looked older than I remembered, more tired. The stress of the last few days had taken a toll on his usually perfect appearance. Hello, darling, he said to Laura. I should have known you'd be here. Hello, Greg, Laura replied coolly. I should have known you'd bring muscle to a conversation. These are my attorneys, Greg said. We're here to discuss a resolution to this situation. What kind of resolution? I asked. One of the suits stepped forward. Mr. Stanton is prepared to offer a generous settlement to all parties in exchange for your agreement to cease all harassment and return any illegally obtained materials. How generous? I asked. $100,000 to you, Mr. Cole. $50,000 to Mrs. Stanton. All parties sign non-disclosure agreements, and this matter is resolved quietly. Laura laughed. Greg, you really think you can buy your way out of this? I think I can make this problem go away, Greg said. Everyone gets compensated for their trouble, and we all move on with our lives. What about Julia? I asked. Julia and I will be relocating, Greg said. New city, fresh start. I looked at my wife, who was staring at Greg with something like adoration. Even now, even after everything that had happened, she was still choosing him over everything else. That's quite a plan, I said. There's just one problem. What's that? You're assuming we want money more than we want justice. Greg's confident expression faltered slightly. Everyone wants money, Mr. Cole. You're wrong, Laura said. I don't want your money, Greg. I want your destruction. And I don't want your money either, I added. I want everyone to know exactly who you are and what you've done. The second attorney stepped forward. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Stanton, I strongly advise you to consider this offer carefully. If you proceed with public accusations, you'll be exposing yourselves to potential lawsuits for defamation, harassment, and invasion of privacy. Will we? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like we have documented evidence of fraud, adultery, and conspiracy. I'm not sure how that constitutes defamation. Alleged fraud, the attorney corrected. Alleged adultery? Alleged conspiracy? Without proof that would hold up in court, your accusations are just speculation. Owen's voice in my earpiece. Nathan, get out of there now! I'm calling the police! Gentlemen, I said, this has been fascinating, but I think we're done here. I started toward the door, but Vince blocked my path. We're not done, he said. Yes, we are. You're not leaving until we reach an agreement. I looked around the room. Julia cowering in her chair, Laura standing defiantly with her arms crossed, Greg trying to project authority he didn't really have, two lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and Vince trying to intimidate me. Vince, I said calmly, you're not a security guard, you're not a bouncer, and you're definitely not law enforcement. You're an executive assistant who's about to be unemployed. If you put your hands on me, it's assault, and I guarantee you that my friend outside is recording everything. Your friend outside? Owen Lee, private investigator, former FBI, currently documenting this entire meeting. He's also got the Seattle Police Department on speed dial. Vince looked uncertain. Greg stepped forward. Mr. Cole, let's be reasonable. We're all adults here. We can work this out. Greg, I said, you've been stealing money from your company to pay for hotel rooms with my wife. You've corrupted your assistant, manipulated your expense accounts, and destroyed 2 marriages. I'm not interested in being reasonable with you. Then what do you want? I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. I said your job, your reputation, your marriage, your future. I want you to know what it's like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. You're talking about revenge. I'm talking about consequences. Laura stepped beside me. We both are. Greg looked at his wife, and for a moment I saw something like regret in his eyes. Laura, he said quietly, it doesn't have to be this way. Yes, it does, she replied. You made sure of that when you decided to betray our marriage. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen, and now you get to live with the results. The sound of sirens in the distance cut through the tension. Owen had made good on his threat to call the police. Time to go, I said. This time Vince didn't try to stop me. The investor meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at the Grand Hyatt, Seattle. 500 people, including Stanton Industries' biggest clients, board members, and representatives from the financial press. Owen and I arrived early and set up in the hotel lobby where we could monitor everyone coming and going. Laura was already there, sitting in a corner with her laptop and what appeared to be a comprehensive battle plan. Any word on the investigation? I asked, joining her at her table. Greg and Julia were officially suspended yesterday. She said the company's internal audit discovered irregularities in Greg's expense reports going back 8 months. They've frozen his accounts and launched a full forensic investigation. What about Vince? Also suspended. Apparently, he was more involved than we realized. He'd been creating fake invoices, forging signatures, and manipulating financial records. So, the fraud goes deeper than just hotel rooms and dinners. Much deeper. Greg's been using company funds for everything. Car payments, mortgage payments, even Julia's rent at that motel. I was impressed, despite myself. That's bold. That's stupid, Laura corrected. Corporate fraud leaves paper trails. Greg thought he was too important to get caught. Owen joined us, carrying coffee and looking pleased with himself. The presentation's been loaded, he said. Greg's laptop is connected to the hotel's AV system, and everything's ready to go. What exactly did you do? I asked. Let's just say that Greg's presentation on ethical business practices is going to be more educational than he intended. Laura smiled. How much more educational? Well, instead of his prepared slides about corporate responsibility and fiduciary duty, The audience is going to see hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and text messages between Greg and Julia discussing their affair. You hacked his presentation. I enhanced it, Owen said, added some supplementary materials that provide context for his remarks about ethics and accountability. What if he realizes something's wrong before he starts? He won't. The first few slides are exactly as he prepared them. It's only when he gets to the section about maintaining professional standards that things get interesting. I had to admit it was elegant. Greg would be several minutes into his presentation in front of 500 people before he realized what was happening. By then, it would be too late to stop. What about security? I asked. Won't they cut the feed when they realize what's happening? They might, Ao said, but I've also arranged for the presentation to be live-reamed to the company's internal network and social media accounts. Even if they shut down the projectors, the damage will already be done. Laura looked impressed. You're more devious than I thought. I prefer thorough, Owen said. We spent the next hour watching the hotel fill up with executives, investors, and journalists. Greg arrived at 9:30, looking confident and polished in his best suit. Julia was with him, playing the role of supportive assistant one last time. She's got nerve, Laura said, watching Julia helped Greg set up his materials. Showing up here after everything that's happened? She's probably hoping they can salvage something from this mess. I said, maybe if Greg's presentation goes well, they can weather the investigation. That's not going to happen, Owen said with satisfaction. At 10, the presentation began. Greg took the stage to polite applause, looking every inch the successful executive. His opening remarks were smooth, professional, and completely oblivious to what was coming. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, thank you for joining us today. I'm here to discuss one of the most important aspects of modern business, maintaining ethical standards in an increasingly complex corporate environment. Laura snorted. The irony is incredible. Greg clicked to his first slide. Corporate responsibility in the 21st century. At Stanton Industries, he continued, we believe that ethical behavior isn't just good business practice, it's the foundation of sustainable success. Second slide. Fiduciary duty and stakeholder trust. Our clients and investors trust us to manage their resources responsibly, to make decisions that serve their best interests, and to maintain the highest standards of professional conduct. Third slide. Accountability and transparency. We believe in complete transparency in all our business dealings. Our stakeholders have the right to know how their money is being used and whether their trust is justified. The audience was paying polite attention, probably expecting a standard corporate presentation about compliance and best practices. Fourth slide. Maintaining professional standards. Personal conduct and professional ethics are inseparable. Greg said, when we compromise our personal integrity, we inevitably compromise our professional judgment. He clicked to the next slide, and his confident expression faltered. Instead of his prepared material about professional standards, the screen showed a scanned hotel receipt from the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Room charge, $450. Charged to Gregory Stanton, Stanton Industries corporate account. Guest names Gregory Stanton and Julia Cole. The audience stirred. A few people leaned forward, trying to read the details on the screen. Greg stared at the screen for a moment, then looked toward the AV booth. I'm sorry, there seems to be a technical error with the presentation. He clicked to the next slide, hoping to get back on track. The screen now showed a restaurant receipt from Daniel's Broiler. Dinner for two, $340. Wine, $180. Total, $520, charged to Gregory Stanton, Stanton Industries corporate account. The murmur from the audience was louder now. People were starting to understand that this wasn't a technical error. Greg's face was turning red. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this technical difficulty. If we could just... He clicked again. The next slide showed a text message conversation. Julia, Can't wait for Portland this weekend. I've never been to a spa that expensive. Greg, don't worry about the cost. It's all going on the corporate account. Julia, are you sure that's safe? Greg, who's going to question it? I approve my own expense reports. The audience was no longer murmuring. They were talking openly, pointing at the screen, and several people were taking photos with their phones. Greg looked panicked. Someone has sabotaged my presentation. These documents are... He clicked again, probably hoping to find his original slides. The screen now showed a photograph. Greg and Julia kissing in the lobby of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Fake! Greg shouted. These are fabricated documents. Someone is trying to sabotage this presentation. But he kept clicking, and each slide made things worse. Bank statements showing company funds transferred to personal accounts. Credit card bills with charges for jewelry, clothing, and spa treatments. More photographs of Greg and Julia at various hotels and restaurants. And then the audio. Owen had somehow incorporated sound files into the presentation. Greg's voice, recorded by Laura during one of his sleep-talking episodes, filled the conference room. Julia, yes, like that. The hotel room was perfect. Don't worry about the expense account. I can make anything look legitimate. The audience erupted. People were standing up, talking loudly, and several board members were making urgent phone calls. Journalists were recording everything, and camera flashes were going off throughout the room. Greg stood frozen at the podium, staring at the screen, as his career imploded in real time. The final slide was simple text. Gregory Stanton, embezzlement, fraud, and adultery, paid for by Stanton Industries shareholders. Security finally cut the power to the projectors, but it was far too late. The damage was complete, comprehensive, and irreversible. Greg stumbled off the stage, pushing through the crowd of angry investors and journalists. Julia was nowhere to be seen. She'd apparently fled as soon as the first incriminating slide appeared. Laura was recording everything on her phone, documenting Greg's humiliation for posterity. How do you feel? I asked her. Satisfied, she said. Completely satisfied. Owen was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. That went even better than I hoped. What happens now? I asked. Now, Laura said, now Greg gets to experience what it's like to lose everything. We watched as hotel security escorted Greg from the building, pursued by reporters shouting questions about fraud and embezzlement. His reputation was destroyed, his career was over, and his legal troubles were just beginning. My phone buzzed. Text message from Julia. Nathan, please call me. We need to talk. I showed the message to Laura and Owen. Are you going to respond? Laura asked. I considered it for a moment, then deleted the message without replying. No, I said. We're done talking. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, video clips from Greg's presentation were circulating on social media, news websites, and corporate gossip blogs. Stanton's scandal was trending on Twitter, and financial reporters were calling it the most spectacular executive meltdown in recent memory. Stanton Industries' stock price dropped 12% in after-hours trading. The board of directors called an emergency meeting and issued a statement distancing the company from Greg's actions. By Friday morning, he'd been terminated for cause, and the company announced a full forensic audit of all executive expense accounts. Julia tried calling me 17 times over the next 2 days. I didn't answer any of them. Owen kept me updated on the legal developments. The FBI had opened an investigation into the fraud allegations, and the IRS was reviewing Greg's tax returns for unreported income. Both Greg and Julia had hired criminal defense attorneys, which suggested they understood the seriousness of their situation. What about Vince? I asked during one of our update meetings. Vince is cooperating with investigators, Owen said. Apparently, he kept detailed records of everything Greg asked him to do. He's trying to negotiate immunity in exchange for testimony. Smart move. Probably his only move. The evidence against him is pretty overwhelming. Laura had filed for divorce and was seeking half of Greg's remaining assets, plus damages for emotional distress and humiliation. Her attorney was also exploring civil fraud claims that could result in additional financial penalties. She's going to destroy him completely, Owen observed. That was always the plan, I said. My own divorce proceedings were moving smoothly, with documented evidence of Julia's adultery and fraud. My attorney was confident we could secure a favorable settlement that would leave me with the house, most of our joint assets, and no ongoing financial obligations. Julia's attorney keeps asking for mediation, my lawyer told me during a phone call. They want to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? 50-50 split of assets? No-fault divorce? Sealed records? Absolutely not, I said. Julia committed adultery and fraud. She doesn't get to pretend this was a mutual decision. They're also asking for spousal support. I laughed. Spousal support? She's unemployed because she was helping her boyfriend embezzle money from his company. That's not my responsibility. That's what I told them. But they're threatening to drag this out if we don't negotiate. Let them try. We have all the evidence, and they have nothing but desperation. The final confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after Greg's presentation disaster. Julia showed up at my door looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Nathan," she said when I opened the door. "Please, I need to talk to you." She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she'd lost weight. The confident, polished woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. "There's nothing to talk about, Julia. Please," she said again. "Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of the couch, looking around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. "I've lost everything," she said quietly. "My job, my reputation, my friends. Greg won't even return my calls anymore." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. Despite everything she'd done, seeing her so broken was difficult. "I know you hate me," she continued, "and I know you have every right to. But I need you to understand that I never meant for any of this to happen." "What did you think would happen, Julia? Did you think you could have an affair and commit fraud without consequences?" I thought she paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "I thought I could be happy. For the first time in years, I felt special, wanted, alive. Greg made me feel like I mattered." "You mattered to me." "No, I didn't. Not really. You cared more and more about your computers and your gadgets than you did about me. When's the last time you surprised me with anything? When's the last time you told me I was beautiful?" I started to argue, then stopped. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had been distant, distracted, more interested in technology than in my marriage. "You're right," I said. "I wasn't a perfect husband, but that doesn't justify what you did." "I know," she said. "I know it doesn't, but Nathan, please. I'm begging you. Don't let them prosecute me. I'll sign any divorce papers you want. Give up any claim to the house or our assets. Just please don't let me go to prison." "Julia, I'm not the one prosecuting you. The FBI and the IRS are handling that. I can't stop them even if I wanted to. But you could testify on my behalf. You could tell them that I was manipulated, that Greg took advantage of me." "Were you manipulated?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe at first, but after a while I knew what we were doing was wrong, and I did it anyway." "Then you have your answer. So you won't help me?" I looked at this woman I'd once loved, who'd shared my bed and my dreams, who was now begging me to help her avoid the consequences of her choices. "Julia," I said gently, You made your decisions. You chose Greg over our marriage. You chose fraud over honesty. You chose immediate gratification over long-term consequences. I can't undo those choices for you." She started crying again, harder this time.
"I'm going to prison, aren't I?"
"I don't know. That's up to the courts. My attorney says I could get 5 years for conspiracy to commit fraud."
"Then you should have thought about that before you helped Greg steal money."
She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes.
"Do you hate me?"
I considered the question. Did I hate her? A month ago, I would have said yes without hesitation, but now, seeing her broken and desperate, I realized that hate required more energy than I was willing to invest. "No," I said. "I don't hate you, Julia. I'm disappointed in you. I'm angry about what you did, but I don't hate you."
"Then please, but I'm not going to help you either," I continued.
"You made your choices, and now you get to live with them." She sat there crying for a few more minutes, then stood up and walked toward the door.
"Nathan,"
she said, turning back one last time, "I really did love you at the beginning. I mean, I know you probably don't believe that, but it's true."
"I believe you,"
I said. "But love isn't enough if you're not willing to honor it." She nodded and left without saying anything else. I never saw her again. 6 months later, Owen and I were sitting in my backyard drinking beer and watching the sunset over Puget Sound. The legal proceedings were finally over, and life was returning to something resembling normal. Greg had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. He'd also been ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to Stanton Industries and their shareholders. Laura had gotten half of his remaining assets in the divorce, which wasn't much after legal fees and penalties. Julia had received 2 years, suspended to 18 months with good behavior. She was currently serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Oregon. Vince had gotten probation and community service in exchange for his cooperation with prosecutors. "Any regrets?" Owen asked. I thought about it. About the marriage ending. No. About how it ended, sometimes. You think you went too far? I think I did exactly what needed to be done. I said Julia and Greg committed crimes, hurt people, and destroyed relationships. They deserved consequences. But seeing Julia at the end, so broken and desperate, that was hard. Owen nodded. Revenge is supposed to feel good, but sometimes it just feels necessary. Yeah, I said necessary. My phone buzzed. Email notification from my attorney. Final divorce decree attached. Congratulations, you're officially single. I showed Owen the message. How does it feel? He asked. Like starting over, I said. Like getting a second chance. What are you going to do with it? I looked around my backyard, at the house that was now entirely mine, at the sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I'm going to try to be better, I said. Better at relationships, better at paying attention to what matters, better at not taking people for granted. That sounds healthy. It sounds terrifying, I corrected, but necessary. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. Somewhere across the city, Julia was in prison. Greg was probably in his cell planning appeals, and Laura was rebuilding her life with half of her ex-husband's money. The smart home system chimed softly, signaling that it was time for the automated lights to turn on. But for once, I didn't need them. I was content to sit in the growing darkness, finally at peace with the choices I'd made and the consequences that had followed. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always satisfying, but it was always necessary. And sometimes, that had to be enough.